National President of AARP, and Dr. Margaret Neal, Director of Portland State University's Institute on Aging. For the benefit of our radio and television audiences, please turn off your cell phones and Blackberries. First, a few announcements. Next week's Friday Forum will be a debate on Measure 49. Multnomah County Commissioner Jeff Cogan will represent the proponents, and David Honeycutt, President of Oregonians in Action, will represent the opponents. The debate will be moderated by Randy Gregg. This week, City Club released a ballot measure report on ballot measure 50. The measure would increase Oregon's tobacco tax through a constitutional amendment. Proceeds would be used to fund health care insurance primarily for children and also fund tobacco cessation programs. The study committee recommended a yes vote on the measure, and City Club will determine its official position next week in a public vote. Because of the vote, we're going to be starting 15 minutes early. The doors will open at 11:15. The vote will begin at noon, and the debate will be immediately after the vote. Please join me in welcoming our new City Club members. Please hold your applause until all are introduced. We have one who's a returning member, and that's Linda Luther, who's sitting out there. She is an educator. And also our speaker today, Dr. Margaret Neal, is a new member of City Club. We're very fortunate to have terrific corporate sponsors, and this quarter's sponsors are the law firm of Barron Liebman, LLP, and Girding Edlin Development. We greatly appreciate their support. Over the next 30 years, the population of those 65 or older is expected to increase in the Portland-Vancouver area by more than 100%. It will double. More and more baby boomers will head into the retirement years. Now, most people understand that this projection has profound implications for housing, healthcare, transportation, and government services. Our speakers today are very well qualified to address the impact of that projection. Bill Novelli is CEO of AARP, the nation's largest membership organization. AARP has 38 million members, age 50 and older, and as he pointed out to me while we were eating lunch, half of its members remain actively employed. Now, I'm not going to ask how many in the room joined me in gasping when you got your initial invitation to join AARP and said, wait a minute, old age is always 15 years older than I am. Mr. Novelli was co-founder and president of Porter Novelli, one of the world's largest public relations agencies. He retired in 1990 to pursue a second career in public service, and before his present position, he served as president of the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids and executive vice president of CARE, which is the world's largest private relief and development organization. And it's interesting, Gentleman's Quarterly rated him recently as one of the 6 most influential people in Washington, D.C., and he might tell us who the other 5 were if we ask him. He obtained both his undergraduate and master's degree at the University of Pennsylvania, and according to his staff, and what he's told me at lunch, he's absolutely adamant about personal fitness and is an expert on the stair climber. Dr. Margaret Neal is the director of the Portland State University Institute on Aging. She's also a professor of community health and teaches graduate courses in research methods and gerontology. In collaboration with the World Health Organization, she conducted an age-friendly cities project, and it's interesting to note that Portland was the only U.S. city included in the study of 33 cities in 22 different countries. Dr. Neal received her bachelor's degree from the University of Indiana, and not to be outdone in the fitness category by her co-presenter, she lettered in varsity tennis. Both her master's and doctoral degrees were obtained at Portland State. Is there a difference between an age-friendly city and a city which stresses the quality of life for all citizens? Our speakers today will help us find out.
Oh, thank you, Dawn, and good afternoon to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today in what AARP, the magazine, has called one of the 5 most livable communities in the country. Now, for those of you listening on radio, I'm holding up the current issue of AARP, the magazine, with Tony Bennett and Christine Aguilera on the cover, and I turn inside, and it says here about Portland that it has European charm meets environmental nirvana. And I certainly agree. Now, when we talk about livable communities, how to create them, how to foster them, protect them, we're talking about enabling people to continue to live where they want to live. And a livable community has to accommodate younger people as much as it accommodates older people. The improvements we make in housing design, sidewalk construction, public transportation, and recreation, among other components of livability, can make life and living better for everyone. Because after all, an age-friendly city is not just an old age-friendly city. Many discussions about livable communities tend to focus on older men and women, often without mentioning younger people. But when we look at livable communities and think about how to create them, we need to keep in mind that we will be more persuasive and more likely to succeed if we keep the intergenerational benefits of livable communities in mind. Because livable communities are important across the generations. Now think about these words, my home, my home. These 2 simple words may be the most emotionally charged phrase that we ever say, with the possible exception of I love you. Our homes carry memories, hold our possessions, and give us a sense of place and belonging. They are our keys to personal independence and engagement in community life. And they are the settings for socializing with family and with friends and with neighbors. It's hardly surprising, therefore, that year after year, when we at AARP ask older people where they want to live as they age, they say, in my home. They don't want to live with relatives in a nursing home or an assisted living facility. My home is the preference of about 90% of older people. And we know that, especially here in Oregon, a leader in home and community-based care, that people value remaining in their homes as long as they can live with dignity. But there are many barriers to contend with. They can be physical barriers like stairs in the house or the apartment. They can be infrastructure barriers like poor street lighting. They can be barriers growing out of personal changes like an inability or unwillingness to drive a car. Many things can be barriers against a full and independent life. Livability is about removing barriers and also about not creating them in the first place. Now, this should guide the way our society goes about designing and building new housing, ideally all new housing, and how we go about our city planning and zoning. Not creating barriers is easier than it is to remove them. Retrofitting or rebuilding the nation's entire housing stock is simply beyond our means. Think of all the houses that were built a century ago when life expectancy was 50. My wife and I just bought such a house in Missoula, Montana. It was built in 1896, just a few years after Montana became a state. Now, back then, most people could manage stairs well enough as they aged. Fewer people were in wheelchairs, so thresholds in doorways were not considered a problem, nor were narrow doorways and halls. When life expectancy approaches 80 and rising as it is now, these are real problems. Anybody who's been involved in home remodeling knows how difficult and expensive it is to widen a staircase or a doorway. This doesn't mean that retrofitting can't be successful. For people whose personal mobility is slightly diminished, non-slip treads on stairs and better lighting in the stairwells and hallways can make an enormous difference. So can grab bars in the bathtubs and lever handles instead of round doorknobs, and removing the threshold at just one entrance to the home. There are many cases when simple modifications like these can make all the difference. My father and mother were able to live 3 years longer in their home because we installed one of those mechanical devices that climb stairs. Now, clearly, new builders and new buildings are a big opportunity. The principles of universal design call for one entrance to the home to be free of any barriers, no stairs or even a threshold. They call for doors wide enough for a wheelchair, a bathroom on the first floor, and a bedroom too, if possible. The guiding principle is clear: avoid the barriers. Don't build them in. Now, this needs to be a marketplace decision where demand for universal design creates supply, and it is happening. Earlier this year, I was at a conference of the National Association of Home Builders. And the builders and developers and contractors and remodelers at that conference are really getting into this idea. There were awards given for those who had come up with innovative ways to build more accessible and livable buildings. Last year, I came out with a book called 50 Plus. It's an optimistic look at how we can make the most of life after 50, and also at the same time make a real contribution to our cities and our nation. Incidentally, the paperback will be out in January in case you want to save the $9. Now, in the book, I told the story of a California woman named Rose Garospi. She was in her 60s, early 60s at the time, and she was looking to buy a house that she could stay in forever. The house she fell in love with had wide doors and halls, a kitchen, and a bath friendly to wheelchairs, no steps, no thresholds, drawers instead of shelves in the lower kitchen cabinets, and cabinets under the sink and cooktop that could be converted from storage to knee space so she could work sitting down. There was more, but you get the idea. She realized that this was a house that could be her home forever, even if she became disabled. And at the time, she was in excellent health. And because the amenities were part of the original plan and construction, they only added $5,000 to the cost, a small price to pay for knowing that she could stay there forever. And that's the beauty of building in amenities, of not building in barriers. Now compare that to the story of Jerry Cohen, who's our AARP State Director here in Oregon and is here with us today. Some years ago, Jerry tore some ligaments in his ankle, thinking that he could still rebound with the younger guys. And when that accident happened, he was living in a 2-story house with the bedrooms and the bathrooms all upstairs. Jerry was essentially trapped in his own home. He needed help to navigate, and he was fortunate to be able to rely on his family to help him get up and down stairs, in and out of the bathroom, even reaching light switches. It was no fun at all. Stressful, in fact. And when Jerry finally recovered, he solved the livability problem. He and his family moved to a new home with everything on one level. It even has a walk-in tub. Now, this is a happy ending, but it only underscores the need to look ahead, to imagine what could happen to make your dream house a potential trap. It also shows the importance of getting the building industry interested in the opportunities that livable designs can offer. Now, as I mentioned earlier, some developers have seen these opportunities. In this area, the Orenco Station and the new South Riverfront developments and the ongoing work at the New Columbia are all evidence of that. And your renowned light rail transit and TriMet system and the Ride Construction and RideWise all help make Portland one of America's most livable cities. Now, a favorite example of mine in the book is King Farm in Rockville, Maryland. It's a suburb of Washington, D.C. For those who don't drive, King Farm offers the possibilities of independent life because it's safe to walk there and the bus is always accessible. This is an enormous accomplishment for housing in the suburbs. Some of the earliest suburbs, like Chevy Chase outside of Washington and Brookline outside of Boston, were built on a similar model more than a century ago. They were built along trolley lines, which were new then and were called streetcar suburbs. You can spot them anywhere because the commercial strips are where the streetcars used to run, and the original developments only went a couple of blocks away from either side of the streetcar line. But with the advent of the automobile, all that changed. The car could go anywhere, and you know the rest of the story. We are an automobile society. Today, more than half our population lives in suburbs, or parts of cities that might as well be suburbs. People are dependent upon their cars. If you want a quart of milk, you've got to get in the car. Going to school, going to the doctor, going to church, get in the car. We got used to it. I don't know if you remember GM's slogan of a few years ago. It's not just a car, it's your freedom. America loves its cars. But as people age, they tend to drive less or not at all. So how do they connect with society? In many cases, they don't. They become isolated and often depressed. We conducted a survey a couple of years ago titled "Stranded Without Options," and that title says it all. The report found that over half of non-drivers 65 and older stay at home on any given day because they have no transportation. Now, many live in areas without sidewalks. They're more likely to be injured by a car when they walk than younger people. And many in the suburbs, and particularly in rural areas, have no public transportation nearby. Sitting at home, often alone, compromises physical health. Isolation can cause depression and can lead to alcohol or drug abuse. Now, we're not only talking about inconvenience here. We're talking about the loss of belonging, about marginalization, about physical and mental deterioration. One of our AARP board members, Dr. Byron Thames, tells of a nurse who retired at 62. She and her 65-year-old husband moved to what they thought would be their ideal retirement home in an idyllic little town with just one traffic light. It was charming and it was quiet, and soon it was a threat to their mobility. The woman had arthritis, nothing serious, and her husband had some macular degeneration, but he could still drive. The closest commercial center and their doctor were 8 miles away. Within 2 years, isolation set in. He had to stop driving, and she was having a hard time getting in and out of the car. Far away from family and friends, they had no recreation, no social life, and no way even to get to the grocery store. Byron and his wife visited their friends on weekends and brought groceries, but the shut-ins had to make do without any extras between visits. The nurse began to put on weight, making her arthritis worse. Her husband went from having a couple of drinks before dinner to more than that. And the couple ended up having to sell their house and move to a town with buses and taxis and access to physicians and stores and other necessities. This is what happens when a community is not livable. The built-in barriers to mobility, and thus to livability, force people to make changes they often don't want to make. And that brings me back to the question of how we accomplish the kind of design and planning that will make communities livable. I mentioned the marketplace, and I've offered some examples of the marketplace responding to need. The National Association of Home Builders Awards, Rose Gillespie's house, and King Farm illustrate all of that. But we need to accelerate this. There is an urgent need for public policy in creating livable communities. A few jurisdictions in the United States offer subsidies or other advantages to builders who use universal design in the construction of public housing. In Italy, a national housing program allows city councils to offer incentives to renovate urban areas and to avoid sprawl. In Japan, the housing ministry has guidelines for construction that are similar to universal design, and those guidelines are linked to government housing loan programs. These are all good ideas, but they're not yet commonplace. And it seems unlikely that in the United States we will ever see housing guidelines or city planning principles directed by government. Now, we do, of course, have zoning regulations, but even these, as we all know, become contentious, and waivers are very common. Now, this is not to suggest that public policy cannot help. It can. But it will only have influence once public policy becomes part of public awareness. Now, Margaret Neal will be talking about the World Health Organization's Age-Friendly Cities Project in Portland. And as you may know, Portland is the only American city in this WHO project. It's one of the best planned cities in America, and that's one of the reasons that AARP found it to be one of the 5 most livable in America. Now, while I've spoken about barriers in private housing, we all also realize that there are barriers in commercial spaces. Elders in Action here in Portland and Multnomah County have developed a certification for businesses that remove barriers and add amenities such as benches, toilets, rest areas, care for the physically impaired, and so on. The elder-friendly program is fundamentally about education and awareness. The WHO report covers a lot of ground, and it's something from which all of us can learn a great deal. Its greatest strength may be that it's international in scope. What we call livable communities and universal design go by different names in different countries, but industrial nations face the same challenges of dealing with aging housing stock, inadequate transportation, and hit-or-miss planning. Now, will the solutions across countries be the same? Probably not. Will the power to change things come from the marketplace or from the government? It's going to differ country by country. But we can all learn from each other. After all, we're living in a globalized society. The world has become flat. And every society and every town must realize and respond to what we all need, a place that we can call home, where we can feel at home, and where we can live out our lives from youth to old age, independent and happy. Thank you very much.
I want to begin by thanking the program committee here at City Club for inviting me to join you today. It's a great pleasure and an honor to be here to share with you the results of our work with the World Health Organization and its Age-Friendly Cities project. As the director of PSU's Institute on Aging, which is both an educational and a research center, one of my duties is to seek funding for the research we do. So our decision to participate in the World Health Organization's Age-Friendly Cities project, which lacked funding, was unusual, to say the least. But when the invitation came, even with the project's intense timeline, it was really too exciting to pass up. These are the reasons. First, we were the only city in the US to participate among the 33 cities in the 22 countries across the world. And Portland, which has been called the capital of good planning, could be showcased. Second, the project would give us a chance to build on work that we've done in the College of Urban and Public Affairs for the last year with Metro and also with the Oregon Department of Transportation, focused on work with older drivers. A third reason for participating was that it meshed perfectly with the interests of a graduate student, Alan De La Torre, and he was eager to work with me on the project. And finally, from a more personal standpoint, for the past several years, I've been living my own research, focused on people who are employed and caring informally for aging parents. My father, age 94, has mobility and cardiac issues. My mother's 85 and has memory impairment. As my parents negotiate the aging process, I've experienced with them firsthand the challenges of finding, selecting, and coordinating support services. With my training in gerontology, I expected it would be easier. I'm not one of the caregivers who participated in the focus groups that we conducted as a part of this study, but I could have been. So I have a personal interest in finding ways in which elders' lives and those of their family and their paid caregivers can be enhanced. Before I describe the study and some of our key findings, I have some people I really need to thank. And the first one is here in front, Alan De La Torre, my trusty sidekick, as he recently described himself. The project simply could not have been done without his work. I also want to thank the members of our local advisory team. These include Senior Representative and Advocate and City Club member Ken Calvin, who is here today, Jerry Cohen and Joyce DeMonin of AARP Oregon, Vicki Herson from Elders in Action, Grady Tarbutton and David Hansen at Multnomah County Aging and Disability Services, Lydia Lundberg at Elite Care, Neil Nagus at Portland Community College, and PSU faculty Sharon Baggett, Carlos Crespo, and Nancy Chapman. And finally, a last addition to the team, a late addition, Jay Bloom, of Bloom Anew, who's championed our project, helping us to share the findings and strategize how to turn them into action steps. We also want to thank AARP Oregon and the National Office of AARP for helping to produce this guide, helping us print the guide and fund an internship for Alan to actually draft it. We thank the elected officials with whom we've had a chance to discuss the findings and talk about next step. And most importantly, I want to thank all of those participants in the study, the older adults, the caregivers, the public, voluntary, and private providers of service who gave of their time to engage in a 3-hour-long focus group, which is a marathon group for those of you who do focus groups. This was per the World Health Organization's protocol that each study site followed, and we are very grateful to them for their thoughts and experiences. Don, in his introductory remarks, referred to the fact that Portland is aging at a rapid rate, and we indeed are. In the Portland-Vancouver region in the year 2000, 10.5% of our population was 65 and over. In 2030, that percentage is going to be 17%. And that figure represents a 137% increase. That compares to a growth rate of 47% for the entire population. Our whole world is aging. 11% of the global population was age 60 and over in 2006. By 2050, 22% of the world's population will be age 60 and over, and that represents the first time in human history where people age 60 and over will outnumber children age 0 to 14. Another trend that's important to note is the fact that we are increasingly an urban world. In 2007, 49% of us lived in urban areas. In 2030, 60% of us will live in urban areas, and that growth is occurring primarily in developing countries, as well as in cities like ours with less than 5 million people. Turning now to the objectives of the World Health Organization study. The World Health Organization wanted to identify indicators of an age-friendly city so that those indicators could be used in cities across the world. They wanted to produce a practical guide to stimulate and guide advocacy, community development, and policy change so that we could actually create more age-friendly communities. What do they mean by age-friendly? Well, in their guide, they say an age-friendly city is one that adapts its structures and services to be accessible, to be inclusive of older people with varying needs and abilities, and finally, an age-friendly city emphasizes enablement rather than disablement. It's friendly for all ages, not just age-friendly. So 3 key concepts: accessible to, inclusive of, and emphasizing enablement. To implement the project, we all followed the same protocol. We had held focus groups. There were 8 focus groups. 4 of those focus groups were with older adults of varying incomes, including low and middle incomes. 1 group was held with caregivers to represent older adults who couldn't speak for themselves, who were too physically or cognitively frail. And then we had 3 focus groups with different types of service providers: public, private for-profit businesses, and voluntary and nonprofit providers. In each focus group, participants were asked to identify what are the characteristics that they felt were age-friendly in Portland, what barriers exist to age-friendliness, and finally, what suggestions would they have for making improvement in each of 8 topic areas, and that's why the focus groups were so long. There were 8 topic areas to talk about. I'm going to list those for you, and we're not going to be able to talk about all of them today. They included housing, social participation, respect and social inclusion, civic participation and engagement, communication and information, community support and health services, outdoor spaces and buildings, and transportation. So a nice mix of topics that covered physical environment as well as social environment. What I want to do with you today is highlight, based on the findings from these groups, aspects here in Portland that work especially well in terms of being age-friendly elements of the city, and also then those areas that rose to the forefront and as being areas that we should really work on improving. And then I'll talk about some next steps. I want to begin with a general, illustrative, positive comment about our city from an older adult who lives in Southwest Portland. He said, "I can walk downtown in 10 minutes, but I have 187 stairs to go back home on. That's okay with me right now, but it may not be later." I think that the community offers a lot of services and a lot of opportunities for social, medical, exercise, enjoying, volunteering, and also entertainment. So, the top 5 features. First, our natural features and our green spaces were valued, even cherished, by most of the participants. Portland, as you know, has a wealth of parks, trails, gardening areas, green spaces that provide older adults with places to be active and to engage in physical and social activities. Earlier this week, an article in the Oregonian reported that our public and private trees cover 26% of our city and have a theoretical replacement value of $5 billion. As one of the service providers in our groups pointed out, historically, Portland did a very good job of creating green spaces throughout the city. They're very accessible, a real amenity. So, top feature number one. Top feature number two is the fact that older adults and service providers and caregivers alike find that there are lots of opportunities here for civic engagement. These kinds of opportunities include work with Elders in Action and AARP and advocacy, and in representing the voice of elders to government officials and programs. Another new program, Life by Design Northwest, brings together 9 major institutions in Portland. This is a partnership to support older adults as well as people contemplating retirement by providing opportunities for in-depth assessment and life planning, lifelong learning, and civic engagement. Overall, here in Portland, we have a reputation for participation which includes older citizens who contribute significantly. As one of our older adults commented, I guess the need we as elders have is to help and facilitate our community to be a civic place. So, opportunities for civic engagement is the second key feature. A third area in which Portland is age-friendly relates to the numerous transportation options we have available. Many participants noted that they felt that TriMet and the nonprofit group Ride Connection provide excellent and affordable services, including the fareless zone, reduced rates for those aged 65 and over, and education in how to ride public transit. The term honored citizen that's used by TriMet is very much appreciated, and for the most part, our participants said that drivers and passengers on TriMet are seen as considerate. All of these characteristics combined to make our transit system seen as an age-friendly feature in our city. A fourth area in which Portland is seen as age-friendly concerns the vast array of community services and organizations that exist here, which contribute to the well-being of older adults and caregivers. Receiving special praise and crossing over into the topic area of communication and information was Multnomah County Aging and Disability Services Helpline, 503-988-3646, which provides callers access to a real live person, and that was said over and over again, a real live person, for information about services for seniors 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The fifth area in which Portland is seen as age-friendly is social participation, particularly with respect to education, physical activity, and children and pets. The educational opportunities that are here for older adults include the fact that higher education institutions allow people aged 65 and over to audit classes for free, for example, at Portland State Senior Adult Learning Center, or to have discounts on degree and non-degree classes for those 62 and over, such as at Portland Community College. Also praised were the variety of non-academic educational opportunities that exist in Portland, such as through programs like OASIS, and city programs through those offered by the Portland Parks and Recreation. These kinds of programs promote community participation, engagement, an active lifestyle for older adults, and thus enhance well-being. Many adults valued time with their grandchildren, relatives, children from their neighborhoods, and appreciated the opportunities that exist for multi-generational contact, including through programs such as Neighborhood House. Similarly, opportunities for watching people and engaging animals and birds, such as through pet therapy programs and housing that allows pets, are appreciated and seen as age-friendly. And this crosses over with our parks. So a caregiver noted, there were a lot of people walking their dogs, so it was entertainment for my mom to watch that. She really enjoyed that. There were many other positive features that were talked about by the participants in our groups. However, those were the top 5. Now I'd like to focus on the top 5 things that we can improve on, and again, there were more of those that I won't be able to talk about today. Through the focus groups, we heard over and over about an issue that you here, the members of the City Club, have dealt with before. Your 2002 report on the affordable housing in Portland states that since 1970, Portland has gone from being one of the most affordable housing markets in the nation to one of the least affordable. and that was before the big jump in prices that followed that report. As a service provider in one of our focus groups noted, affordability is a huge issue, especially downtown. It's accessible to services. People want to live downtown. Also cited as barriers related to affordable housing were the limited programs for rent assistance and subsidy, the long waits for available units, apartment to condominium conversions, and neighborhood gentrification, and high property value and taxes, all of which can lead to the need for older adults to move out of their neighborhood, severely disrupting their social ties, their links to familiar services, and their ability to be engaged. Also noted as a barrier was the high cost of supportive housing, such as adult foster homes and assisted living facilities. And I can attest to that from a personal basis. A second area where improvement clearly is needed is in the area of employment. Many older adults, in fact, do want to work, and yet they cited few opportunities for employment, for paid work. There were some exceptions mentioned, such as New Seasons grocery stores. Many participants cited age discrimination in employment as a reason for the lack of employment opportunities. And other instances of age discrimination were reported with respect to volunteer opportunities and even service as jury members. As one older person noted, they think you're outdated. In some cases, that may be true. A barrier to employment concerned deficiencies in computer skills. Programs to address this concern exist, such as programs in which seniors train seniors. But they need to be advertised, and employers were seen as needing education as to the benefits of hiring and retaining older workers and rethinking job structure and compensation to consider part-time work and flexible work scheduling options. A third area needing improvement concerns the accessibility of our outdoor spaces and environments. In Portland, some areas of town provide poor walking environments for older adults and people with disabilities, such as in Southwest Portland, which is hilly, and neighborhoods outside the urban core. Funding for maintenance and development is needed, as well as careful planning for quality and accessible environments for those of all ages and disabilities. A fourth area needing improvement relates to housing design and development, and Bill talked considerably about that in his remarks earlier. Although new and remodeled public buildings are required to meet Americans with Disabilities Act regulations, this is not enough. A professional designer with a local firm spoke directly about new housing developments in the region. She said, "A reporter called me and said he was writing an article about new homes in the Portland area, brand new construction built to be accessible." And I laughed and said it would be a very short article because there aren't any. She went on to note that there actually was one, a multi-story condo project in Vancouver that was being built with elevators, but that from her perspective, we have a long ways to go. The fifth area that came up as a barrier and is needing improvement concerns the co-location of housing and services. Although the city's doing this with its center and corridor planning, we heard clearly that many of our older adults see this as an unmet need. Having services located near housing facilities facilitates aging in place, social participation, and sustains the environment. As Bill noted when he began his remarks, Portland was recognized last month as AARP magazine's one of 5 top places to live and retire in the country. Portland is known as a creative, innovative city where people's talents are used and challenged, where there's a commitment to the environment and to sustainability, and where, as PSU Dean Marvin Kaiser says, people can grow as they age. But we can be better. The project I've described here is just one of many efforts underway in our region to address some of the issues and improve the quality of life for older adults. We have a social and financial imperative to tap the vital resource that our elders represent. As stated in the resolution passed by Multnomah County's Board of Commissioners, which created a task force on vital aging. These resources include elders' wisdom, expertise, and available time. With the rapid aging of our population, the time to do this is now. Over the past week, we've had the opportunity to discuss this work with local elected officials, community leaders, and citizens. In the near future, we hope to have a meeting with representatives from the mayor's office, the city planning bureau, the county, other local leaders to discuss the findings, not just from our Portland study, but also the global study, and where we can go from here. As a researcher, I cannot fail to note that this was a very small study, and additional information is needed from those with lower incomes, of diverse ethnic and cultural backgrounds, and those who live in different parts of the region. Neighborhood-level priorities and actions could and should be identified. Again, active involvement of older adults themselves in identifying those priorities for action and monitoring progress is crucial. I hope I've managed to whet your appetites to learn more about our study. There are copies of our local study in the back of the room, and you can also download those on www.ioa.pdx.edu. Again, that website for those of you in the listening audience, www.ioa.pdx.edu. In conclusion, we all have a role to play. Individuals need education to learn about the aging process, to understand it, to plan for it, to combat age discrimination. We need to plan for our later lives, thinking about what we want to do with our time. We also need to think carefully about our housing choices, seeking universal design features that will enable us to remain living as independently as possible for as long as possible. And we need to seek a location that's near to needed and wanted services and amenities, including transportation. Businesses and organizations can think about becoming elder-friendly certified through Elders in Action, and employers can begin planning for an older workforce, tapping into the skills, work ethic, institutional memory of older workers, thinking creatively about job structure and compensation models. Service providers, including governmental bodies, can consult those with whom they aim to serve and learn how to do their work better. For our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, let's work together to enhance Portland as a place where elders and we all thrive. Thank you very much.
Margaret and Bill, thank you very much. Asking questions is a privilege of City Club membership. Please limit your question to 30 seconds. End it with a question mark rather than an exclamation point. Today's first question will be asked by City Club board host John Horvath. John is project director for the Parents and Children Together study at Oregon Health Sciences University. He joined the City Club in 2004 and is co-chair of the club's new leader council.
Thank you both. You hinted at it today, and I want to ask you to hone in on it a little bit more. As certainly the population ages, there's going to be a much greater need for caregivers and service providers. Can you please discuss the growing pressure and changes and concerns of caregivers and service providers that will be needed, in addition to the things that you've talked about the aging population?
Oh, I'm so thrilled you asked that question, because as I was delivering those remarks, I thought I forgot to talk about the lack of trained professionals in geriatrics. We have a huge workforce shortage looming in terms of having paid caregivers to care for elders, those elders who need supportive services. It's something that we have to make a priority in this country and in our community.
I would only add that I think it's fair to say that nationally, our long-term care system is really sadly broken. We've got to find new ways. We've got to find new ways to pay for long-term care, and of course, we all know the unsung heroes are the caregivers, men and women who are taking care of elder loved ones. Here in Portland, as I understand it, there is a much better balance between home and community-based care and institutional care than we have in the rest of the country. This is one of the things we have to strive for.
Hi, Jay Bloom, City Club. Margaret, I want to thank you for the acknowledgement, but not necessarily for starting the rumor that my name is changing to Jane.
I'm so sorry.
This is not the city to do that in. Bill, I know you're going to catch an airport very shortly, and I know you've been on a whirlwind trip here in Oregon. I appreciate you coming. In your book, you mentioned that the boomers could represent a real asset for employers and for civic engagement. Would you care to collaborate a little bit on that? Thank you.
The boomers already have begun to give back. It is wondrous to see. What we have in this country are 78 million baby boomers moving into their older years. By and large, they've been successful, and now they're interested in contributing to the country, contributing to their families, and really engaging in civic enterprise. This is all what the book is about. It's about how we as individuals can not just enjoy life, but contribute to society, how we can leave a legacy, advocate for a cause, help to fix healthcare in this country, the long-term care we just talked about. So if you're a boomer, or if you're older than a boomer, as I am, then I say, let's ignite a revolution to reinvent America.
Justin Gottlieb, City Club member. My question is, as Portland, and you alluded to this, develops South Waterfront and the Pearl District and making these flat condos accessible to the boomer generation, is there any thought 10 or 15 years down the road to these neighborhoods looking almost as if they're a geriatric ghetto where everyone's coming into one area and you'll have no age diversity there?
I think that's an excellent question. I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is that what we hear from baby boomers and even from older adults today is that most want opportunities for intergenerational interaction. And so I think that there will be a move to try and maintain that kind of generational spread. The difficulty would be if younger generations get priced out of the market, and that's what we need to guard against.
Mac Pritchard, City Club member. My question is for Bill. You talked about the universal design principles that would promote age-friendly housing. I wondered, Portland is also a center for sustainable or green buildings and sustainable development. And I wondered if you had looked at the green building movement and saw any lessons learned there that might be applicable.
We haven't studied it as much as we have this issue of livable communities, but I will defer to Margaret on this. I think the two are very closely linked in so many ways. When you talk about a livable community, you're talking about making it environmentally friendly and making it accessible, as I said before. So I would think that what we need to do is to look at both those dimensions and put them together.
Yeah, I agree that that's a need for us to look at. The other thing that I should point out about our study that we just completed is that the focus was on today's older adults. Baby boomers may be even more inclined than the current population of elders to think about these issues of green development. And so one of the ways that I would suggest we proceed in this city is to get input from boomers as we plan for the future, as well as our current population of older adults.
Chris Smith, City Club member. One of the hats that I wear furthering that European charm for Portland is to chair the Portland Streetcar Citizens Advisory Committee. We spend a lot of time worrying about issues of ADA compliance. We don't tend to think about issues of aging separately, and I know it's not the right framework to think of aging as a disability. So, Margaret, you've already spoken to ADA not being enough for housing. Are there things that we should be doing in the transportation realm where ADA is not enough and there are additional issues we should think about?
There's one really simple thing that came up in the comments by participants in our focus group, and that was specifically related to light rail, not necessarily the streetcar, and that is that the accessible car be placed in the same place on every train so that positioning could occur in advance and the train didn't take off by the time the individual got there to the accessible car. It's a simple thing.
My name is Sharon Joyce, City Club member. In '89, I was put into a nursing home because I could no longer get out of my wheelchair, which is very awkward when bathroom activities. Since then, I have required a live-in caregiver. You might say I'm on the cutting edge, then I got aged as well. I have many suggestions and absolutely no traction as to getting any of them done. My brother has been a World Health Organization consultant since its inception and has even ideas far advanced to my own. Where can I get my ideas considered in a way that I can actually be there, such as not real early in the morning when my caregivers are not available?
It's a great question. We have a number of advocacy organizations in the Portland area, and they're here. AARP is an advocacy organization, Elders in Action, and I would suggest that you make your offer to them, and I'll be willing to bet they snap you right up.
I would only add that, the average nursing home in this country now costs $70,000 a year. So individuals like yourself who are able to stay at home with caregiving, with help, with money follows the person, this is not just good for your quality of life, but it's good for the country as well, for the taxpayers as well. So we would welcome your ideas.
Carla Kelly, City Club member. One of the things about Portland, one of the few things that I don't like is that there are large areas with very nice housing and no sidewalks. And I was thinking as I was listening to all of this that it's not only difficult when you're young and you have children and there's no place to push them, to push that stroller along, but it's going to be extremely difficult as people age. It's impossible for wheelchairs and so forth. Do you have any information about places where sidewalks have been retrofit into communities that didn't build them to start with? And if so, how were they funded?
Do you know the answer to that question, Alan? I don't have information about retrofitting of sidewalks. I fully understand your comment about the need for sidewalks. We had people talk about them from the standpoint of being in a wheelchair or a cart and needing that access and not having it. The one thing we have in the city is we do have a maintenance office where you can call and you can report problems with sidewalks. But our city services are underfunded. And so it's a matter of trying to figure out what the priorities are. And I think it takes a lot of phone calls to get your neighborhood on the list and moved up in priority for getting sidewalks.
We have time for one more quick question and one quick answer.
Okay, I'll try to make it quick. Barbara Wolf, City Club. There was reference to the condos that are going up that are being fitted for our seniors, but the concern about affordability for families. Is there any pressure or discussion or anything on this with the developers as they come in? And if not, is there a way to get that to happen?
I think developers are becoming increasingly aware of the need for affordable housing. The city is working hard to create affordable housing. One of our participants said, of course, what's affordable to a government official is not necessarily what's affordable to me. So we have some issues in that regard. Anything to add, Alan? Alan's the urban planner expert here on the staff.
We are out of time. I will thank Bill. He's on his way to the airport for a vacation in his Missoula home. Remember his book. And Margaret, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate your time. We're adjourned.